family and friends, it's Kanoi, and I am here with a video on how I made my latest junk journal. I wanted to film this process because I know that when I was first starting to make a junk journal, I went down the rabbit hole of looking for so many videos, and I know there's so many out there now, but I figure the more that's out there, the better. So I'm making this one out of a big little golden book. And I basically started by trying to neatly get the pages out of the book. So I tried to tear it, but it wasn't really coming out. So I just took my razor blade and started to, tear out a few pages at a time. And then now I'm just cutting it right down the middle. I wanted to be able to preserve both the outside and the inside of the cover because that picture on the inside is so darn cute on both sides. So that was one of the things that I set out to do. So now I'm just cleaning up the edges. I know a lot of people, when they make journals with the little golden books, they like to keep that gold foil, and there are videos out there to show you how to keep that. But for me, it wasn't important because I'm actually going to be painting this cover. So now what I'm doing is measuring out a cereal box so that I can create a plate on the front end because I do want to keep that original picture on the front side. So just taking out the flaps off of this Lucky Charms box, best cereal in the world, and using my rotary cutter to now cut both the plate and the spine. I measured out the spine, measured out the plate, and I believe this book is 7.5 by 10. I want to say that was the final measurement whenever I ended up measuring out the pages. Luckily, this 3x5 card was perfect for this picture. It was the exact size that I needed. So I'm just measuring how far from the edge this picture is so that when I take that index card and place it on the title plate, I know exactly where to cut. So this made it really easy to use a rectangle instead of like a circle or anything else like that, because obviously it's a lot easier to cut that out. Once again, using my rotary cutter just to get good clean edges. You could use a razor blade. Some people have cut from the center with scissors and then went out to the outside, but I found that this was the best way for me to cut the straight edges. So this pretty much came out perfect, and I'm just taking my razor blade, cleaning up more of those edges, those frayed edges from where the gold foil was and where it was bound into the spine. Now, whenever I measured the spine up against the thickness of the actual cover, I realized that the spine needed to be a little bit thicker. So I cut out enough of the cardboard to create 3 layers. I didn't mind that it was a little disjointed, and I actually had to cut out, several pieces because I didn't have enough pieces that were all one length. So I had to use several, different sizes, and it was fine. Like once I glued it all together, I was fine with that because I knew that I was going to cover it anyway. So it worked out pretty good. I am just using some Mod Podge here to make sure that it is all glued together and it sticks perfectly. PVA glue would be another good option. I want to say that Mod Podge is a form of PVA glue. I may be wrong. There's so many great glues out there, and I have a bazillion of them, and everybody kind of has their favorites, but Mod Podge seemed to work really great here. So again, just measuring everything out, making sure that it's all the right size before I tape the spine to the cover. I'm just taking a sanding block now to rough up the edges as well as the glossy cover because I've actually painted a Bible before when I was just practicing, because at one time I thought that I wanted to paint Bibles and I did that and the paint immediately peeled off, and I realized I never prepped it properly. So I know that sanding the glossy page is one of the things that helps to prep it. And so now I'm using this Tyvek I think it's called, tape. This is a really great tape for this, and I know a lot of junk journalists actually use this tape to kind of strengthen up the spine. It's really sticky. I think that it's actually some kind of home improvement tape. I want to say I actually bought it from Home Depot. uh, Somebody can comment below. I feel like it has something to do with like drywall or something or paint. No, not paint. I don't know. But anyway, regardless, it's some sort of how home improvement tape, I think. So I'm using my bone folder to make sure that the tape really gets into those grooves. And then I'm just taking some washi tape to cover up the ugly tape. So aesthetics are a great thing in junk journaling. It's really easy to make things look a lot prettier and at the same time not worrying about them not looking pretty, if that makes sense. So then I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with the outside spine, but then I thought, okay, I'm just going to paint over it. So I roughed everything up and now I am applying a layer of gesso. Another one of those mistakes that I made when I tried to paint the Bible. I never gessoed. Gesso is the glue for the acrylic to stick to the cover, which I am quickly learning. And that's the fun in the art process or in this junk journaling process, however you look at it. To me, it's a form of art, and art is such a beautiful thing. It really does feed your soul and it develops something within you that I think other things don't. And so now I'm just picking out some of the pages. I knew I wanted to save a couple of the pages to be inside the book just so I could keep the integrity of the actual book itself in my journal. I knew that I didn't want to use any of the pictures that are already in there. So for instance, the inside cover, I didn't want to use that. The picture that's on the front cover, I didn't want to use that. I didn't want to duplicate it because for one, I wanted to be able to put it in another junk journal because it's so darn cute. And two, I just didn't want it to be repetitive. I like junk journaling because I love the ability to make every page a little bit different from the one before it and from the one after it. So now I'm just starting to pick out some papers and using everything from vintage papers to ledger papers to vellum and magazine pages, book pages. Everything and anything can go into a junk journal. It's really up to you and what feeds your spirit and what you feel like is calling to you. So this book, for instance, is it's a modern book. And I know a lot of people actually really like to just use vintage books and vintage items in junk journaling. It's kind of the thing to do, which makes sense because if you think about, the original junk journal was really truly made out of quote junk. I mean, it was junk mail. It was book pages. It was truly what you would think of as old stuff. So we've taken that to more of a commercial thinking, and everything we use is got kind of like a vintage feel. But I like to have a little bit of a mix of both modern and vintage. It's just fun to me. So really, it's up to you. It's what you like. It's your style. I kind of take on the styles of different people that I follow on YouTube. And I think that's the fun part of it too, is getting inspired and watching other people's channels and figuring out what you like, figuring out what calls to you, and just what makes your heart smile. So for me, it's like bright colors. It's, some of the vintage stuff. It's kind of just an eclectic mix, really. But it's funny how I'll pick out stuff and I'll put it in my pile. And as I start to create my signatures, a lot of them end up getting the boot. One, because I just have way too many pages sitting out and waiting. Here's an Edith Holden book. And then two, just because it stops calling to me. But then when I watch the video back, I'm like, I should have put that in there. Or I'll look at another page and be like, ew, I don't really like that page. Why did I stick that in there? But it's okay. Never a mistake. That's what I believe. So I'm just going to speed it up here a little bit to save you all from having to watch my dreadful experience of having to pick out every single page. And now I'm just starting to kind of fold them. Some of the thicker cardstocks, I like to use my what do you even call that? Is it like a creasing board? I don't even know. But right there, you could see it. I am putting in that crease onto the page so that it folds easier and stays flat, and then just using a bone folder to make sure that it truly is, creased and is able to stay that way, so that when I put the pages together, they'll stay flat. Because this is a larger junk journal, it isn't going to have those typical pages that are turned to the side and folded in half. Some of them are, but I wanted to be able to keep a lot of the pages upright. So I don't know if you saw it there, but I had to actually tape pages together. Some pages I'm sewing together, some pages I'm just reinforcing, some pages I'm taping. It really just depends on the thickness of the paper, whether or not I want a pocket. But I'm just showing you some of the options and the way that I was able to put together some of the papers so that, it creates a larger page. This is another great way to reinforce any pages that you might have that may be older, like older book pages that might be a little bit fragile. It's always good to just add a little bit of washi tape so that when you sew the signatures together, that thinner paper won't end up falling out. And so that night after my gesso dried, I ended up taking my first layer of acrylic paint. This was part of the hardest process for me, was picking out the colors, because I was so scared of painting a color that I would end up hating. I feel like I love turquoise so much, but I just wasn't feeling like that was the main color for this. So I decided to make this be the accent color. So I'm putting it down first, and I actually had to create this color. I used kind of like a robin egg color, and then I added some blue to it so that I could get this nice deep turquoise color. And then I'm using some crackle medium. This is actually the next morning, so again after the acrylic paint dried, and added a layer and allowed it to dry. So of course, with this video being sped up, I actually didn't get that process, but I did let the crackle medium dry for several hours, and once it dried, then I put my main color on here. So I created this color as well using, I think it was like a rose gold color. It was like a really deep bronze, and I added some red acrylic to it so that it came out to be, I guess, kind of like a metallic red. And of course, with that crackle medium, the turquoise is actually shining through. Now, these wouldn't be the colors I would normally put together in any kind of palette, but it works. And I'm just taking some gold wax, going right along the edges and along the spine, and then sealing it all together with a varnish. This is a matte varnish by Liquitex. There are several varnishes out there. I did a whole lot of researching trying to figure out which one would be the best, and in the end, this is the one that I came up with. It's like $10, I think, at Hobby Lobby or Michael's. Use that coupon. There's always a coupon. Don't buy anything full price at any of the craft stores. And now I am taking my plate, which I painted the same way, and taping it, gluing it on using tacky glue. I found that this would probably be the best glue to glue the glossy side to the glossy page. This is really, I guess you could say it's kind of like a sticky PVA glue. I mean, I guess that's why they call it tacky glue. And my extra large Holy Bible coming in for the win to hold down that title plate and allow the glue to dry. And while I'm waiting for that to dry, I'm now adding some details to some of the pages. So here I'm just placing some envelopes to create some interaction. And the easiest thing to do is just glue the flap down to the other side of the page so you have a nice little flip out. And here I wanted to add this page to another page, so I'm just washi taping it in. My dog actually chewed that washi tape, which I was super sad because it's one of my favorites, so that's why the edges were all wonky like that. But again, junk journal, anything goes, so it actually kind of worked. And so I'm just reinforcing the pages once again with more washi tape making sure that it all stays in place, and reinforcing that music paper. This was an old music book that it came from, so I knew that it was going to need just a little bit more strength, especially when you start to take needle and thread to it. And I have actually had pages pretty much fall out of my journal before, so I'm trying to avoid that again. Now, this is the part of the process that really takes the longest for me, is putting together my signatures. I guess if anybody came from the outside and went to go looking through my journal, they would think there was no rhyme or reason. But for me, when I'm putting it together, there is totally a rhyme. I really like to have, a good variety of papers and all different sizes. So I don't like to have the same size papers right next to each other. I like for them to be layered, and when you flip through them, you're kind of having to flip at different heights and different thicknesses. And I don't like to have patterns back to back. I want writing papers in between. So it really does take me a very long time to put these together. I mean, I probably spent a good hour and a half, at least maybe 2 hours, just putting 4 signatures together. So after I finally got my 4 signatures together, I wanted to create some tabs. And when I got this idea, it was really just because those pieces of scraps were sitting on my desk. And I just said, you know what, I can sew something together. And I created a little cluster tab. And so this is going to go really fast, but basically I'm just taking scraps, fabric scraps, paper scraps, and placing them into my signatures in different spots so that they'll stick outside of the journal. I like to have tabs. I like to have things sticking out. It's just kind of like a sneak peek into the chaos that's on the inside, and I love it. I love it. This piece of fabric here was actually from a furniture store, I believe. You can Google, and I've said this before, you can Google free fabric swatches, and you will find that some furniture stores will, or even drapery, I think it was drapery, they will send you like 6 to 10 swatches or something like that. And you actually have the ability to choose which ones you want. So it's kind of cool. Otherwise, these other scraps I've gotten them from different places. I mean, you can buy little stacks of quote vintage fabric. They're not always really vintage, but they look it, and it's really cute. I'm not a purist when it comes to vintage items. I just want it to look that way. I want it to remind me of my childhood. I want it to take me back to a place of innocence, to when a time was, things were just truly pure in my eyes. And that's what this does for me. It takes me to a happy place. And so that's why I do it. I love it. Here was a piece of Starbucks packaging that I just laminated, and I cut it out, and now I'm putting a little brad in to create a little turning wheel, I guess. It's just something fun to play with. And these paper flowers, I saw somebody do this where they sew the paper flowers right along the edge of the paper. And so I did do that. I did a straight stitch right down the side. I mean, I glued them on at first so that they'll stay put in the sewing machine, but everything else I'm just kind of placing randomly all along the edges so that every signature has at least several tabs of some sort. The fabric pieces, some of them I clustered up, some of them I made kind of like a ribbon. It's really up to you. There was no method to it. Now, as far as now sewing in my signatures, I personally like to have an odd number of holes. So here I chose to do 5 so that I could find the center really easily and then space it out from there. This is another part of the process that always takes me so long. If I could, hire out somebody to do any part of my junk journal, it would be sewing the signatures. I just do not like this part. I could not wait for it to be done. So I'm now taking my crocodile and punching the holes. This huge crocodile is where it's at. Like, this thing punches holes through anything and it gets really far in there. I mean, you saw it go, it went all the way to the middle of the book page. So it's really perfect for this job. I tried to use the handheld one and it did not go all the way in. So I'm glad I have this one. I know some people just use, I don't know what it's even called. It's in this bookbinding kit. That little thing on the side looks like an ice pick. Some people use that thing. Forgive me for my lack of terminology, but some people just use that and just poke holes and it's fine. You know, you can do whatever you want. For me, it's just easier to get the needle and everything through those nice clean holes that the Crop-A-Dile does. I don't do that through my signatures. You'll see what I'm doing. I'm just clipping together all of my pages and I try to keep them as closed as possible when I'm doing this, because once you spread out your pages and you know, lay them flat, it will spread them out and they won't stay lined up. So to me, I clip them together and try to keep it as closed as possible. And then you kind of have to push your pages back down because they will start to raise up again. And so I'm just marking where the holes should be using that template, and now taking that little ice picky thing, whatever it's called, and poking the holes that I will now use to sew in the signature. I'm using wax thread. You can get this all in a bookbinding kit. You can get them off Amazon. I'll try to link it below. But I go in through the center. I'm going to slow it down just a little bit. So I go in through the center hole, pull it out, leave some of the thread, you know, hanging out on the inside. And then I'm going up. Oh, sorry. You have to actually go through the cover as well. That would be good. So coming out through that center hole. And you can just see how much I'm struggling with this thing. So then you go in through the next hole that's right above it. Making sure that you are able to get through all of those papers once again. Just be careful how you pull it, because you can so easily pull the thread out. I've done it so many times. And then up through the top hole, coming out the back. You can see I lost my thread there. And then we're coming right back through that second hole. So you will be going through holes twice. Once you bring it out that side, we're going to skip down past the middle hole and go to the second to the last. So the one right below the middle hole. Coming out the back once again, going down through the bottom hole, getting it through the signature, back through that second to last hole, and whenever you come out the back end, now we're coming up through the center, and that's where you end up. I'm hoping that made sense. It's so hard to see and it's so hard to show, but if you can just, I mean, you're basically weaving up through the top, and then once you come back down to that second hole, you have to just bypass the middle and weave through once again. And then once I get both of those strings in there, I just pull it really, really tight. You have to do this because I have, you know, in the past had some of my signatures loose because I didn't do that. And then I did bring the string right underneath and tied it off with a square knot. If you don't know what a square knot is, it's basically just whichever way you tie it the first time, you go the opposite direction the second, and that kind of creates like a locking for the knot. And then I sewed in the rest of them. I wasn't going to make you watch it, all 4 of them, because it took forever. But I got all 4 of my signatures in there, and now I'm going to create my closure. I'm using a seam binding, and I've seen this, you know, on several videos. So I bought some. It's just a rayon seam binding, and I'm using my distress stain. I think it's distress oxide stain. And so I'm using some water and just crinkling it up. This is creating a really cool tattered and vintage look. So I'm using another, I believe this is Victorian Velvet. I forget what the first color was. Might have been walnut, but the second one is kind of like a pinky Victorian Velvet. So you've got the brown, you got the pink, and it just looks really cool. The front side was going to be too thick for me to put an eyelet through. So I decided to put the eyelet just through the back. So I'm using my handheld Crop-A-Dile, putting in the hole, and I'm grabbing an eyelet. And to be completely honest with you, this is the first time that I'm using this handheld Crop-A-Dile. I I haven't done a whole lot of eyelet punching, so I was pretty proud of it coming out and turning out the way that it did. And so I'm just pulling that seam binding through, tying it off with a square knot once again, figuring out how the heck it's going to wrap around. And once I did figure it out, I decided to use a bulldog clip to attach to the other side. So I'm just tying it off, figuring out where it should be placed. I'm trying to leave enough space for this to grow. So I tied it off where I thought would be the best spot for it to be able to clip to the edge once it grows out completely and gets that big alligator mouth. And then I'm just adding a little key to it to just, add some more interest. And you can see that right now it's clipping straight to the seam binding. And then I wanted to create a charm. Never done this before either. So I'm using this little brad hook. Really easy to install. You just make a hole and stick it in there. And then it has this little ring there. So I'm creating a charm with different strings, different ribbons, all kinds of textures, different colors, really truly an eclectic mix. You can see I've got the yellows. I used some brown eyelash trim. I'm using, I knew I wanted red in there for sure. I knew that I wanted turquoise. I knew I wanted yellow. I mean, these are just those happy childhood colors. A little bit of creamy gold colors in there. Really, it's up to you. It's what you like. It's what calls to you once again. No method. Some people would probably look at this and be like, girl, that does not work. But hey, it works for me. I like it. I love this twine, that the baker's twine. I think that it is so cute. So I definitely wanted some of that in there, and the rickrack. I mean, just so many fun things. And then, of course, using some hemp cord so that I could put some charms on there. I don't know about you, but I love it. I love that sound when the charms hit the table. There's just something so yummy about it. So I was like, I gotta have a charm. I need a tassel on this junk journal. I'm working so hard on this junk journal. If I do not make a tassel, it's just not going to be complete. So that's really what the holdup has been with this whole junk journal, is me making a tassel finally. So I cut out about 2 feet because now I'm folding it in half. So I did want this to fill the whole edge of the spine. So I'm just tying it off right in the middle with some of that baker's twine, and then creating like a little head at the top. I don't know if you made those Tootsie Pops at Halloween where you put the napkin over it and you create like a little ghost. That's what I thought of whenever I made this. So I just tie it off right at the top, create like a little ghost head, just so it has, I probably could have made it a little bit bigger actually, tied it a little lower, but it's okay. It just needs something to hold everything together and to be able to hang properly. And now this is my favorite part, was being able to go into this, I have massive amounts of jewelry and beads, vintage and new, of just stuff I've collected. And I could not wait to be able to dig into them and add all of these charms and buttons and beads. I mean, I have cases of them. And so this brought me so much joy. And it really is so easy. I mean, you just place a bead, tie it off, tie a knot, and as long as the opening of the bead is not bigger than your knot, you're golden. So the only issue I ended up having was some of the smaller beads actually wouldn't fit onto the hemp. The hemp was just a little bit too thick. So I guess, I've got to figure out a way to use those. I'll probably put them on like paper clips or something like that to create cute little dangles. I don't know. That was something else that I wanted to add, and I'll probably do that later. It's always good to, leave some room for you to create along the way. Those junk journals that are completely done are beautiful and amazing. But then for me, part of the fun of junk journaling is actually being able to create onto the pages that you have. So I did like to leave a lot of blank space And if you look at my flip through, which is posted on YouTube now, you'll see that. Like a lot of the pages aren't decorated. Actually, all of them. None of them are. The only decoration really were the tabs and some of the pockets. So I wanted to be able to have full, creative freedom in this journal. And this is the largest one I've ever made or ever had. So there's a lot of space for me to be able to create. And I think it's going to be fun for me to be able to practice different techniques and watch videos and get inspired and recreate some of the things that people have done here. And that's why I love this space. I love it that this is a place that can fill your spirit, fill you up, fill your cup, restore your virtue, however you look at it. But it just brings me joy. So once I get all of the different beads on there, nope, I still have one more to go. That pretty much wrapped it up though, once I got all of the beads on. It's very messy looking. I don't know if there's any way to make it look better, but I'm not mad at it. I am totally fine with it being kind of like a hot mess because it really does represent me in my life. I am a total hot mess. And so it was really easy. You just tie it off right onto that little ring there, and it's good to go. There are so many videos on how to make tassels. I've seen so many different methods. This was my way of doing it. I wanted it to be as simple as possible. I didn't want to have to use any kind of wire or anything like that. And that pretty much wraps it up. I just hand lettered the word journal onto that front plate, and I'm ready to get started in this journal. I thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, and would love for you to stick around, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of the crafty videos. I'll see you guys in the next one. Aloha.